needs reality television when you have the hallowed halls of the United States Congress? What happened on Capitol Hill today should have been a step toward preventing another financial crisis that threatens the global economy. What we got instead was a 2-hour display of political theater that could have won a Tony Award if it wasn't so predictable. J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon went before Congress today to explain how his company suffered $2 billion and counting in losses by engaging in the same high-stakes trading that led to the financial collapse of 2008. The drama started right away as Dimon was confronted in the chambers by protesters decrying J.P. Morgan's foreclosure process.
To face the people that you foreclosed on.
Dimon was able to weather that storm, and he wasn't too affected by some mild prodding at the hands of Senate Democrats.
We would have had a direct loss of maybe $1 billion or $2 billion if AIG went down, and we would have been okay.
Then you have a difference of opinion with many analysts of the situation who felt the AIG bailout did benefit you enormously. And I'm not going to carry that argument with you now, sir.
They're factually wrong.
This is not your hearing. I'm asking you to respond to questions, and I also only have 5 minutes.
You know, maybe Dimon never lost his cool because he knew an all-out love fest was ready to come his way in the form of swooning Republican senators.
You're obviously renowned, rightfully so, I think, as being one of the most, one of the best CEOs in the country for financial institutions. You miss this. It's a blip on the radar screen.
We can hardly sit in judgment of you're losing $2 billion. We lose twice that every day here in Washington. And plan to continue to do that every day.
The loss is unfortunate. You've apologized for that. You've kind of walked us all through that.
I mean, what is this? Hey, Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job. Is this a Senate hearing or an episode of The Bachelor? It wasn't a big leap for Republicans to turn their fawning over Jamie Dimon into a symposium on less financial regulation.
One of the tensions that we face here is we want to be sure that we are adequately regulating our financial institutions, but we want to be sure also that we basically don't have the regulators running our private sector institutions.
And who do the Republicans want to help them establish a future of limited financial regulation? You got it, Jamie Dimon, of course.
We're here quizzing you. If you were sitting on this side of the dais, what would you do to make our system safer than it is and still meet the needs of a global economy like we have?
I guess if I could just leave you with any one thing, if you could come back this time next year and talk about how the industry has put together large-scale best practice committees that would help us keep banking as a private enterprise rather than as a government institution.
Did I hear you correctly there?
Yes.
Did you volunteer to be part of that conversation?
Yes, me and lots of other folks said we'll do whatever you want. We'll even get apartments down here. Let's go through in detail. We spoke to lots of people.
Wow. So the wolf that eats up the chickens is the one who protects the eggs. So here we are nearly 4 years after the worst economic crash since the Great Depression, and nothing has changed when it comes to accountability. It was almost 4 years ago when the CEO of Lehman Brothers, Richard Fuld, sat before Congress to push the blame around. Lehman Brothers was one of the major culprits of the subprime lending crisis. Today, we had perhaps the nation's most powerful banking CEO take a browbeating from some Democrats and heaps of praise from Republicans. But there's no indication J.P. Morgan or any other bank will end the derivatives trading and other risky gambles that could send us into another economic tailspin. Wall Street emerged from the financial crisis better than ever before. The same can't be said for people who lost their homes, their life savings, and worse. Get your cell phones out. I want to know what you think. Tonight's question: do you believe risky behavior by Wall Street will drive us into another financial crisis? Text A for yes, text B for no to 622-639, or go to our blog at .msnbc.com. I'll bring you the results later in the show. Joining me now is Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. Senator, let's get right down to brass tacks and knuckles. Do you think anything good came from today's hearing with all of this fawning celebratory rhetoric that emerged from the Republicans on that committee?
Well, Michael, I'm not on the committee and I wasn't in the room, but from what I could hear and what I read, it really was quite incredible. You have Wall Street, which through their greed, their recklessness, and their illegal behavior caused this horrendous recession, leading to mass unemployment, people losing their homes, losing their life savings. We just have a recent report from the Feds. Median family wealth between 2007 and 2010 went down 40%. This is the results of Wall Street. Wall Street, over the years, spent $5 billion in order to get deregulated so they could do what they're doing today, and the result was the crash of our economy. And to exalt and to praise and to honor the head of the largest financial institution when it comes to Capitol Hill is beyond my comprehension.
Yeah, well, it's beyond the comprehension of many people who thought that somehow financial regulation had at least been at the center of the kind of rhetoric of the Senate to be able to at least protect the American people. Do you think, in light of this, that we could actually end up having even less financial regulation than we do now?
Well, look, I think the real story is and everybody should understand this is not a question of Congress regulating Wall Street. This is much more a question of Wall Street and all of their money regulating Congress through their lobbying, through their campaign contributions, and with Citizens United, that situation is even more dangerous. Look, Michael, here's where we are right now. These are some of the issues that have to be addressed. You got 6 financial institutions today, J.P. Morgan Chase being the largest, that have assets equivalent to 2/3 of our GDP. They write half the mortgages, 2/3 of the credit cards. If Teddy Roosevelt were alive today, what do you think he would say? He would say, and I would agree with him, let's break them up. You have banks that are charging working people 25, 30% interest rates on their credit cards. We should be addressing that issue. You have incredible conflicts of interest at the Fed. Jamie Dimon, the head of the largest financial institution in this country, sits on the New York Fed, and during the financial crisis, his bank received over $300 billion in low-interest loans. Do you think there's a conflict of interest there? Do you think we should deal with that? So the issue now is, does Congress have the guts to stand up to the most powerful entity in the world, which is Wall Street and their money?
Well, it's a question that is not inconsequential. Let's take a listen here. Mitt Romney spoke at a business roundtable in Washington today.
I will halt all the Obama-era regulations and carry out a review of those regulations and get rid of those that are not meaningful or that cost jobs in this country. We've got too much regulatory burden.
I don't know, Bernie Sanders. Senator, that scares me. How dangerous is this position?
It is once again almost beyond belief. We are where we are today because Wall Street fought for deregulation, fought for the end of Glass-Steagall, fought to allow commercial banks to merge with investment banks, to merge with insurance company, fought to allow them to be able to sell worthless products without the kind of proper regulation to know what's going on. The end result is they drive us into a recession, and then Mr. Romney says the solution is to deregulate them even more, let them do even more of the mischief that they do. The bottom line here is that what we need is a Wall Street and financial institutions that cease being the largest gambling casino in the world and start investing in the productive economy in America and start helping us to create the jobs we desperately need.
All right, Senator, thank you so very much as usual. Senator Bernie Sanders. Now let's turn to William Cohen, former managing director of J.P. Morgan Chase, now a Bloomberg View columnist and author of Money and Power, How Goldman Sachs Came to Rule the World. Thank you for joining us, my friend.
My pleasure, Michael.
As someone who used to work at J.P. Morgan, what did you take away from today's testimony? How did it register to you?
You know, it really registered. The thing that lingers in my mind, Michael, is how did Jamie Dimon let this happen. Jamie Dimon is known as a micromanager. He was a micromanager when he worked for Sandy Weil at Citigroup. He was a micromanager at Bank One. He was a micromanager when he came into J.P. Morgan Chase. He even stopped the use of black sedans at night when bankers work late. He is a serious micromanager, and yet he let this chief investment office with $350 billion of the bank's cash reserves be invested without so much as going to an investment committee meeting in that division to regulate, to figure out what was going on. It's like he said, I'm going to let this Ina Drew, who was the chief investment officer, who has since resigned, I'm going to let her do this. I have a lot of faith in her. I'm paying her $15 million a year, and I'm going to let her do this. And unfortunately, it's completely out of character for this guy to let her do what she wanted to do without his supervision. And I don't understand it. And he didn't answer it today.
Right. I was going to say, so we have no shred of evidence to suggest any hint that he might have done this because, look, I'm overburdened on this end. I want to take care of other things that demand my attention. This is something that she needs to pay attention to. But as a micromanager, certainly this is a central operation of the company there. And it seems to me that if you don't take care of this particular part of your bailiwick, everything else goes out of kilter.
Well, I mean, obviously, this is a division that was making a ton of money, as much as $5 billion over the years. This is the first time they'd suffered a loss. Clearly, though, this is something, I think what he's not saying here, what he didn't say to the senators and what they didn't ask, and maybe the House of Representatives on June 19th will ask this question, what he didn't answer was, why he let her do this. And clearly, this was done at his direction. He really wanted this money to be invested in higher yielding assets, and it was paying off for a long time without anybody really knowing it. When they lost money, that's when we find out about it. And now, of course, we're all sort of suffering from this.
Sure. Well, he went on CNBC, that is, Mr. Dimon, after his testimony. He talked about whether he will lose any compensation because of the losses.
My comp is completely set by the board of directors, 100% set. I assume that they'll incorporate this in how they evaluate me. But I'm going to leave that to them. I think it would be inappropriate for me to tell you what the board is going to do.
It ain't merit-based. It's not based upon our performance, is it? I mean, this is what the rest of regular Americans have to deal with. So based on that statement, do you imagine Dimon will be going home with any less in his pocket at the end of the year? Again, I think it's all going to come down to the kind of performance that the J.P. Morgan has for the rest of the year. What they're saying inside J.P. Morgan in the second quarter is they're actually going to perform very well despite this $2 or $3 billion loss. If Jamie Dimon puts up the kind of numbers he put up last year, which was something like $20 billion of profit, he'll end up with that same $23 million that he had in income. But aren't we in the same place we were before when the financial crisis first hit and we talked about all the lessons we would learn and the extraordinary, hand-wringing we did? Aren't we really back deja vu all over again here?
Thank you, Michael. You're absolutely right. I mean, nothing is going to change on Wall Street. Bernie Sanders is absolutely right because the incentive system on Wall Street has not changed. Bankers and traders on Wall Street are rewarded to take risks with other people's money. You saw that with the chief investment office at J.P. Morgan Chase. That's why they took these crazy risks. Until we make these bankers and traders and executives of Wall Street firms have real skin in the game again, like they used to when they were private partnerships, nothing is going to change on Wall Street.
Wow, you're down with OPC, other people's cash. William Cohen, thank you so very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Remember to answer tonight's question there at the bottom of the screen and share your thoughts on Twitter @EdShow. I want to know what you think. Up next, austerity now or austerity ow? The real risk Romney's plan poses to teachers, cops, and firefighters. We'll be right back.